Hi, I'm Adam and this is the UplinkPort. Now annoyingly, I have another cold, however videos on this channel stop for nothing and this is certainly no exception. Next to me I have a Zhone SHDSL EFM MXK series MSAN. Yes, we have another MSAN on the channel, along with 3 CPEs I have not used or touched in over a decade. So whether you're into retro networking gear or just curious on how things work, stick around. Right, so first of all, I hope the audio quality on this is marginally better than it had been previously. In here, everything is now re-insulated, re-soundproofed and re-boarded, which is what this was originally when it was built about 5 years ago. It was all plasterboarded, it was all really nice in here. However, the roof leaked and everything got destroyed. Subsequent illustrations of all of this ended up as an absolute mess, really. It was just a bodge of everything. But obviously, since doing the videos, it's become quite apparent that I needed to redo all of this. I've just been putting it off because of cost. However, Adam hit a milestone birthday several weeks ago, and Drunk Adam decided to make it future Adam's problem because Drunk Adam bought all the materials that was needed for this, and I didn't realize I had done that until I got the delivery email saying it was going out that morning. So lesson learned, don't buy stuff while you're intoxicated, because this has been a very expensive month for everything in here. Wood in the UK at the minute is not cheap, along with all the other materials I needed in order to do this. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you click that subscribe button down below. It helps me out, it helps the channel out. There are a number of other things that I have done because a number of you have asked to be able to support me as well in terms of buying t-shirts and even on Patreon. So I have set up a lot of that, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. Now, what we actually need to talk about in the video is everything that I have got next to me. This is a Zhone MXK series MSAN, and MSAN stands for multi-service access node. It's the same type of technology that the ZYXEL is running. Basically, that means we can put different technology cards in here to service different technology types, such as ADSL, which this doesn't have, SDSL EFM, which this has got in it, Ethernet, VDSL, all of that type of good stuff. Now, the issue I have with this one is I have very little documentation from it. I will be honest, I have already powered it up purely because I had to factory reset it, and that in itself was an absolute nightmare. Zen very kindly sent me their documentation for factory resetting it, but that documentation didn't take into account if this was running a standby backup in it, which it was, and every single time I reset it, I ended up getting it fully restored, but it wasn't telling me it was doing that. I literally just got back to a login prompt and it was moaning about the fact that it couldn't authenticate via radius. So I actually had to go and buy a CF card flash reader, because this is running a CF card inside of it, to be able to back it up, because I actually had to modify the actual files on the CF card, along with deleting a load of critical system files, and I had no opportunity of being able to recover this because Zhone had no documentation or no manuals or no software for this whatsoever on their website, so I had to tread carefully. However, the first time you see me accessing the web interface on this, because this does have a web interface, will be the first time I'm actually accessing it, because all I know is I've managed to factory reset it. I've got to the login prompt on SSH or on terminal, which has enabled me to log in with the factory default details. Now, the other issue I've got with it as well is this should come with a software counterpart. I do not have the software counterpart for it, so I'm going to be solely reliant on the GUI, which from what I've heard from ex-Zen engineers is not exactly the best. I also have no experience with this platform, so I have no idea how that's going to go. So you are going to follow me on this journey, as with everything on here, literally wandering into the dark. I have no idea how far we're going to get with this today. I'm assuming we're going to get it powered up, but whether we're going to get anything connected to it or not, I don't know. Now, currently installed in this is SDSL and EFM service cards. Now, SDSL in the UK stands for Symmetric Digital Subscriber Line. It used to allow symmetric speeds of up to 2 meg up, 2 meg down, and it would use all of the frequency range for a copper line, so you had no voice services on it. But on the back end of that, it enabled what was called EFM, or Ethernet in the first mile. That was basically channel bonding SDSL circuits together to give more speed, or Ethernet style speeds, over the copper loop. Now, you could, on some service providers, BT used to do up to 8 copper pairs, and TalkTalk, I believe it was up to 4. We have those CPEs here because I don't know if this will work only with EFM or whether you can use individual SDSL routers on it. I'm wandering into the dark. The only device I actually know how to use on this is a Draytek, because I used them back in the past. The Hatteras networks, which for my sins is another ADVA-based device, but it's what BT used to use. This actually has its own endpoint that would typically sit in an exchange, which isn't this particular MSAN. It's a completely different model. That's what BT used to use. I have no idea what this is like. I've bought it off of eBay. And John, as you may remember in the previous video, has very kindly lent me his RAD box, which would have been servicing the TalkTalk Business EFM circuit. So hopefully, between all of this, we'll actually get something working out of it. The job I've got is, how do I get all this to work together? And I think we'll start off by actually going over the MSAN itself and actually just finding out what we can do with it, how we enable it, and what, if anything, is going to talk to it. Once we then get it configured, we can throw it into the Exchange cabinet and then start messing around with everything on this, because fundamentally there's two types of technology to this. SDSL, which we should be able to use PPPoE to authenticate on, which is what the Draytek3100 is going to be for. The Hatteras network and the RAD box are using EFM, which is effectively IP. So, depending on how we configure this, which I have no idea on, that we should be able to get hopefully PPPoE working on that, and then we can progress onto the EFM side of stuff, which is going to require IP address or static IP addresses to be routed across a layer 2 tunnel. And with the ADVA, I get the impression, as with everything else I've done ADVA related, I'm going to be banging my head with a brick wall. Against a brick wall, even. Words. Right. Let's move on to the desk and see exactly what we've got in front of us. So a few people have asked me to quickly go over hardware before we do anything, and I've got no issues with that. It's currently sat on the bench and I need to sort out the DC side anyway, because powering this up even temporarily to wipe the management card on this was not exactly the best of experiences. So the chassis itself is a Zhone MXK, and I believe it's the 319. The 3 stands for how high it is in terms of 3 rack units, and I believe 19 is how wide it is as well, which is 19 inches. Now, again, this is a MSAN, so it will take multiple different line cards, as I've said originally. Now, it's actually relatively quite light compared to the ZYXEL, which I was quite surprised about. All the cards are blades, and as I said, I've had this out before purely because I needed to image the CF card that is sat in here, and this thing is filthy. Even me just pulling out that card, my hand is covered in black dirt. But that's the board itself. I'll probably put a couple of high-res images up somewhere so you lot can see them. Now, this caught me out before because I tried to put it back in the other way with the board facing down. It's not actually how it goes in. But despite its age, these actually, this is going to trip me up now. I was going to say aren't actually too bad on getting in, but there we go. It's not too bad on getting in. We've got 4 gigabit SFP ports on the front. We have our craft serial or terminal interface, and then we have our management port, which is configured over IP. In the middle, we have our fan tray, which is also our environmental tray as well. And oh my God, this thing is filthy. But this thing has had years of dirt and grime going through it. All of these fans are 60mm, 25mm deep, 48-volt fans. They are incredibly noisy. I need to work out something with being able to reduce the number of fans or putting a resistor in line to try and reduce their speed, because with this on, it's about half the noise as the chassis, the ADVA chassis. I can't record around it, so I need to work out something with that. But that is the management tray. Also, the management tray, environmental management tray even. I can't boot this up without it or even take it out during, because it moans that there is a major critical alarm and decides not to do anything. Oh God, this thing's filthy. Then we move over to the SDSL cards, which I haven't actually taken out yet, to be honest with you. And they're as dirty as the others. But I imagine it's going to be a split board in the same way that it is with the ZYXEL. You can see in there too much. I will probably go to the hassle of cleaning this up, assuming everything works on it, and bring it back into some sort of clean. Oh god, this thing's filthy. I'm not going to touch this too much because I'm going to cover everything else in dirt as I am already. That is the front of it. We'll move on to the back and have a quick look at that. So before I fully move this around, one thing that did catch my eye is the fact that the power cables come out of the rear of the device and they catch on the rack every single time this has been taken in and out. These cables are quite chewed up in the corners. The one on that side, from memory, is even worse. Now, on the back of the device, we literally have a clear Perspex panel, which is just covering all of the DC side of stuff. I need to sort out the DC cables for this. I will probably take these out. I may even temporarily take the plastic cover off and just run the DC power cables from the DC power supply straight in it. They're not as big as this. However, it's not fully loaded. And I don't believe, despite the size of these power cables, that this is that energy hungry. I will probably regret that. In fact, actually just looking at this, the data manufacture for this is the 15th of the 10th, 2012. So that gives you an idea as to how old this is. Also, I don't know where this came from. Normally Zen give me a bit of background for it. I didn't ask on this particular occasion. However, most of their kit at the end is denoted by the exchange reference, and NENT, I believe, is Newcastle. So I have decades of Newcastle exchange dirt all over my hands. Right, so I've made off a new power cable, which is coming from our mainstream communications DC power supply in the exchange cabinet. I will be honest, this is the second time we're recording this because the quality on this was horrendous, and it's just as well I did because I'd actually reversed the polarity of the incoming power supply. When I took this off, I marked the return with a red pen, and because I don't have any grey connectors, I put red on it. And I completely misassociated I associated with the red. Fortunately, this has a reverse protection diode in it as well. So when it was actually connected, it didn't do anything, fortunately. I'm hoping this hasn't done any damage, but we'll find out shortly. Also, just to note, these cables, now that they're out, I don't know if it comes across on camera, but these are quite chewed up in places just due to it being in and out of racks over time. Now, these cables are double insulated in that they have a inner and outer sheath. I don't know if that's going to focus on that. So it would have taken a lot to actually wear through those. However, I'm still just baffled by the overall design of them coming out. What I might do with the Perspex cover is A, first clean it, but also B, I might make a small hole in here, put a grommet or some sort of rubber grommet in it, and then feed these through. Not that I'm planning to take this in and out, but obviously these are a lot thinner, and if these do get trapped at all inside of the case, then I'm potentially going to end up with a short and blowing a fuse, and I don't want that, assuming I haven't already blown this up. But I think for now, I'll get this turned around and we'll look at sorting out what A, we're going to power it up to if it still powers up, and B, assuming it still does, then we'll look at trying to sort out something with the fan tray, because I need to try and remove some of those fans from service, or at least make them quieter, because this sounds like an aircraft carrier taking off. So, good news initially in that this does seem to have booted. The green LED is on the active supervisor and it's solid. These modules did start to boot as well. However, I have now taken them out purely because I've actually had to cycle the chassis a couple of times to get something working for the fan tray. So my little DC incident doesn't seem to have caused any lasting damage to the chassis that I can see at the moment. Now, going back to the fan tray, I think I've got a working solution, and I've been through a couple of different ideas and options. My first one was to do what I did with the advert and use these little DC to DC buck converters. However, all the ones I have lying around cap out at 36 volts on the input side of stuff. And obviously being a 48 volt chassis, that was just not going to work. They were going to pop in a spectacular fashion, and I've had enough of capacitors popping on me. Not that you've seen that video yet. That is a spoiler for an upcoming one. But I did look at doing resistors. However, I only have quarter watt resistors in here, and the quantity required, the value required to drop 48 volts down to sort of 12 volts was excessive. So that got shelved as well. I did order a up to 60-volt input, and I think a 60-volt on the output as well, DC to DC buck converter off of Amazon. But it's going to take a couple of days to get here. And while all that was going on, I kind of just went back to basics and realized, well, hang on a minute. I only need the top layer of fans running on this because there's nothing in the bottom slots for any of this. So we only need the top ones running. Why don't I just literally series link all the fans together and split the 48 volts between them? So that is exactly what I've done. They're getting about 16 volts each. It's enough to keep them nice and quiet, but it's enough to spin them up. I say nice and quiet. These have got horrendous bearing noise on them. However, it's a lot more manageable than it is with the drone of all these fans running at the same time. I did just put one of these in. However, even that is just too noisy. So I have literally taken a feed out of the header. I have the pin connected purely for the monitoring of the fan revolutions, and then out of a positive, which goes into the negative, and then they just daisy chain themselves around and then back into the header. That does seem to work. These power up, they run. I have only literally just added this header cable in for the monitoring of the fan RPM, just to try and get rid of the critical alarm, because providing it sees one of these, it just turns itself into a major alarm. But that does seem to be what I'm going to be running with for the time being. And assuming it all works well, I might replace all these fans and then make this wiring harness up properly and just leave it like this so it can actually sit in here running. I mean, this has been on now for probably about 15-20 minutes, and that card itself is not hot at all. So I think this will work really well. Right, the fan tray stroke environmental management card is back in, but also the critical light is back on. The only thing I can think of is, although the card is now monitoring one of the fan RPMs, that fan RPM is now too low, and it's triggering the low RPM threshold on the management monitoring software, whatever this is running, which of course is putting on the critical light. When I had a single fan on running at full speed, it was enough just to trigger a major alarm rather than the critical one, which is what I was hoping would be the case. However, I hadn't taken into account the low RPM threshold. So I need to see if there's a way we can actually ignore that or lower the lower value on this, like we did with the ZYXEL unit. However, with these spinning so much slower than they were previously, I have no idea if it's going to make any difference. Also, I have the SHDSL and EFM line cards now installed. However, these seem to have booted into a really weird state. Normally, these would boot both active and in fault. However, the top card now is showing no fault and is active. So I don't know whether it's crashed on boot because I plugged both of these in while the unit was on, or whether slot one has now got some form of configuration in it that's actually made this particular card live. I honestly have no idea. The only way we're going to find out is by actually jumping onto the GUI for this and actually finding out what's going on. And in order to do that, I need to jump onto the craft port to set up the management interface, which fortunately the documentation for Zen actually covers the configuration of the management interface. So we should be able to get onto this and at least configure this, or at least look at what we need to do to get something configured. And it also gives me the opportunity to go through the audio of this clip before I do anything with it, because although the fans in this are so much quieter, the bearing noise on this at the minute is horrendous. These fans are shot. Right, so a lot has happened between the initial MSAN messing around with and where we are now with all of this. Number one, I've actually been through the Zen documentation that they sent me in a bit more detail, and I've actually had to configure the MSAN off camera purely because this documentation includes a lot of the Zen templates and a lot of the config that the NOC would have used. Now, there's no passwords or anything like that in here. However, there are quite a few endpoints, and I don't want them getting onto the public domain, really. The chances are they're not in use. However, that's not the point. Zen trusts me with all of this kit when they send it to me, and I'm not going to expose any information like that. So if we jump to various parts of the document in here, it will be with that information removed. But one interesting point to note was that I thought this used a standard serial cable, which I don't have anywhere near me at the minute. But it turns out it actually refers to a console adapter, which is one of these, which is exactly what the advert was using. Now, what it has shown me is the clone that Zen sent me. They sent me an official advert one and this clone. The clone's actually got a pin missing inside of it. It's not broken, it's just not there. That meant that this did not work with that, and for a while I was scratching my head until I actually swapped it out with the official Adva one, and I've actually been able to get to the terminal session to be able to configure it. So that is dead. But it is configured. I haven't tested it yet. If I jump back to the console port, which I am still logged in on, and if I do, what was it, show, oh yeah, backspace doesn't work, show interface, no, was it interface show, there we go. So it is configured with 192.168.20.190, which is on the lab network, and the interface is up. That is all I've done, purely because I got slightly distracted. So while setting all this up and going through this documentation, I did actually find the official Zhone manual for the MXK319, and it goes into a lot of detail in setting this up. This also refers to the Zhone external software as well. Now, I did actually reach out to Zhone direct and asked if I could have a copy of the ZMS software or the Net Horizon or whatever it was used to configure these back in the day, and this is a screenshot of that, and also what it can do. And interestingly, this design follows very similar to that of the Adva software as well, which I also don't have. So I don't know whether there was some crossover or similarities between it or whether it's just coincidence. But they did reply back to me and they said the channel sounds interesting. However, because of an Oracle database licensing, it prohibits them from giving it away. Now, I have gone back to them and said, can I buy it? Is there any way we can do anything with it? They've also got concerns about the age of the software, and I accidentally mistakenly called it the MXK317 rather than the 319 because I was rushing to get this out, but also the firmware and having no instructions of anything like that as well, that basically they can't support it. So it is kind of what I expected from them. And I did go into it saying I appreciate that you might not be able to do anything for me, but if you can, it'd be really good. Now, I have gone back to them and say, is there a chance I can buy it? Is there any firmware floating around for this that is more modern than the version I've got? So I'm just waiting for them to come back and probably say, no, they don't have anything, in which case that's absolutely fine. We will continue with the documentation we've got here and the GUI. Just scrolling through this doesn't fill me with confidence in that I'm getting very much Adva vibes in terms of configuring all of this. Interestingly, Zen's documentation here makes reference to actually setting up policers on the port because they're needed for future customer onboarding and setup. So I'm not looking forward to this, if I'm completely honest with you. I think it's going to be trouble. However, at the end of the day, this is fundamentally just a switch, and I had the same concerns with the ZYXEL, but maybe not as many, in that the ZYXEL is a lot more newer and things do seem to be more refined from that manufacturer. But I am hoping we should at least be able to get an SDSL connection online and authenticated, because at the end of the day, it is just a big switch. All it's doing is just converting Ethernet to SDSL in the background. So I doubt it supports PPPoA. It will support, hopefully, PPPoE. It should support PPPoE. I don't even know if I want to venture down the PPPoA route at the minute. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's jump on the web interface and see how far we get with all of this. Right, so let's try and jump on the GUI. Now it was, I might have just copied that. And I'm assuming, no, I doubt there's any HTTPS on it. There is, reading for the manual, the option to set it up and create the certificates, but obviously we haven't done any of that yet. Now I'm assuming this is admin and Zhone. Yes, it is. Okay, that is actually pretty cool. Can I actually do anything? No, this is just the status. Well, to be fair, it's not even, this is either a browser thing or this just doesn't actually show anything because all of these are lit. Interestingly, that fault light is now back on that card, and nothing's linked on any of that. That's definitely got a link on it. Let's just run through the cards, I guess. So shelf card and slot 1, slot 2. So these are the SHDSL. So these are the SDSL modules. Interestingly, that says not provisioned. So we need to work out how to do that. That's supervisor A. Obviously, there's no redundant supervisor. Redundant supervisor in slot B. It didn't come with one. Controller. That makes me wonder if there's a way to turn that off. Now, interestingly, I thought these fans were rows, but apparently, according to this, it's based on left, middle, and right. So they're in groups of 2 rather than the rows of 3 that I thought. And interestingly, it's doing quite well, even with the fans ramped right down, running at 12 volts. It's only running at 30 degrees, and it's not too warm in here, to be fair. Now it's all insulated in here, and that I'm more than happy with. Performance is just the supervisor stats. Alarms, that'd be interesting to look at. So, okay, so apparently the link downs are the ones that are causing the criticals. Now, is it just because there's no physical network uplink that's causing it? Obviously that's not in, and obviously the fan speed error, so it is triggering a low RPM error, which is only minor, which is what I was expecting to just have on the front of that card, but obviously with these now being down as well, it's triggering the critical alarm as well. So we'll see if bringing one of those up removes it, and if there's a way to disable any of that. I'm guessing this is just going to be port statistics. Yeah, they're all down. Management interface is up. I'm guessing there's no information on that. I mean, to be fair, this is just a statistics page, isn't it? So all it is going to be is just the statistics on what actually is going on with it. The MRV vendor is actually the SFP that is actually in this. It's one of the generic brands. Bridging statistics, port, VLAN, no entries there. Obviously, none of this is set up. There's no default configuration for it. Everything that was on here from Zen has been wiped. And it's a shame, because I would have loved to have seen how it was set up to be able to work backwards from it. So, as with everything, this is me being thrown in at the deep end with all of it. I might see, because I have the backup from Zen for this before I wiped anything of it. So I could restore that backup. And I wonder if there is a local user Zen may give me access to be able to go through and just see what this would have been set up as back in the day. Purely because in their documentation it notes it doesn't note the NOC password, it says use NOC standard password. So I'm assuming at some point there was some sort of standard thing for it. Management interface, DHCP leases. Maybe this is doing bridged IP, where this is doing the DHCP. I don't know. Voice. Oh yeah, this does have a voice module. It can have a voice module as well. Test. Well, there's nothing in there apart from chassis polling intervals. Maybe turning that off turns the alarms off. No idea. Where were we? Configuration. So let's have a look. Cards. I'm not going to configure it. Let's flick through the menus first and see what's what. Redundancy, and obviously as more have more than one supervisor, and I'm guessing we have to set that up. Ethernet ports, alarms. I'm status tracker. I'm shimming. Oh, this will probably be for SNMP. Interestingly, it's got GPON on it. There was a GPON module available, but I don't know if it was for this. Unless it's for one of the other models. Link aggregation, so obviously bonding or aggregating multiple ports together via LACP. I have no idea what DBBO is. These are all in decibels, so maybe this is something to do with profiling for speed. Probably tells me in the manual. No idea what this is. I have no idea what any of this is, but does that surprise you in any way, shape or form? IP on bridge. Oh, that's what I'm on. Ethernet connections. Static route. Now I did configure the static route out of this as well. That was also in the documentation that Zen gave me, but I excluded that because it did have Zen default routes in there for IP addresses. and 254 is the root, the lab router, not the DSL router. That's those. Okay, data bridged. So what does this do? Zohone's devices use up to 2 times bridge. Okay, so also Zohone have their own CPEs. I'll throw a picture on the screen up of that as well. I think I said earlier on that it probably would have been an idea to have bought one for this, but I haven't, so I might buy one anyway. But this basically goes on about when VLANs are in use, 2-wire bridge, VLANs cannot be used anywhere else on the MXK system. Okay, there's a lot of stuff I'm going to have to go through and understand, but just having a quick look at stuff. Uplink bridged connections. I'm guessing. Okay, so this seems to be for the Ethernet interfaces. Whether this is for SDSL bonded or not, I don't know. Although going on about VPI and VCI, I guess VPI and VCI was still relevant in the SDSL days. I can't honestly remember. And one thing that has just caught my eye that I was talking about earlier is accept PPPoA packets. What is that actually going to do if I turn this on? Is it going to be as clever as the ZYXEL in that it does PPPoA to PPPoE conversion, which a load of people were really annoyed at me about, saying I cheated when I'd done it. I hadn't. I turned on the support for it and it did it for me. So yeah, and obviously there's tagging for VLANs and different. Oh, it supports Q in Q as well, which is a VLAN within a VLAN. I don't know what any of this is for. I don't know whether this is for the Ethernet side of stuff or whether this is for the SDSL side of stuff. I'm assuming that, bearing in mind it's in the configuration options, that this is probably more for the Ethernet side of stuff. I'm assuming that once we configure these cards, that we might be able to do something in here. I don't know at this moment in time. Let's see if we can actually configure one of those. So if I say enable, yes, enable, fail to enable cards. Now it is got a fault light on it, but I don't know whether that fault light is a good sign or a bad sign. Reboot, disable, enable, delete, modify. Well, what to add when it's at home? Slot 1 card. Let's see the card type. SHDSL bonded line type. Okay, surely you should have picked this up yourself, or can you get the cards to do different things? I don't know. I don't even know which one I'm supposed to select. I mean, obviously it's nothing ADSL related. It's nothing DS1. It's nothing E1. It's not E3. It's not POTS. I mean, we've got the SHDSL there, but I have no idea what the difference is between the NT and NTP. Obviously, it's not ISDN, link aggregation. It's not POT stuff. It's not a DSL splitter. I have no idea what any of that is. T1 stuff. Let's select SHDSL. Does that change if you change? No, it doesn't. Cards may fail when card deletes and processes start. Okay, no idea what that means. Let's just okay it. Okay, well, it's provisioning it. The fault light is still on. Is this similar to maybe the advert where the cards run their own software on them? I don't know. I mean, with the adverts, when you actually loaded the module in, you only had to select what it was. You didn't have to go and select a card type and then the software version that was running on it. Ooh, the active light is flashing on it. Hang on, I'm going to move my mic because it's moving, making clicky noises. Okay, that was actually quite cool. I think I reached over just in time for all of that to come through, and I'll cut out the little bit where we had to wait. But that sounded like all the relays clicking in for all the channels. Now I don't know how many relays clicked in, but there's 24 lines available to that card, so I'm assuming there was 24 relays that individually clicked on. Has this done anything different? Well, the card is apparently running. What that actually means in the grand scheme of things or not, I have no idea. Nothing else has changed on this in terms of what is what. I think I'm going to go and have a little bit of a play with the menu and see if I can work out what I can turn on. Yes, granted, I should probably just read the manual and probably come to a conclusion an awful lot quicker, but hey, where's the fun in that? I'm going to go and play, and if I can find out where or what we need to do, then I will come back to you before I plug in the Draytek, and I may even put this in the cab and tempt fate and just see if it works. Right, I'll be back in a minute. So, I have pulled the Draytek out of the box, which means I have made progress. And well, I say made progress, I haven't done an awful lot, to be completely honest with you. I'll go across to the screen in a second, but I've pulled out the Draytek, and this is something I used to use an awful lot back in the day when SDSL was available. Drayteks were just my sort of go-to. We use Drayteks everywhere. Not so much these days, especially with all the vulnerabilities, but this did the job. Now, the box that this came in was the official Draytek box. There wasn't much in it. I don't have the DSL cable for this. Obviously, it's just a normal IEC power cable. I don't know if it works. I have some concerns about if it's going to work given the state of the box and the water damage on it. In the box was a bit of blast from the past in that there's the Draytek product catalogue, which listed all of the models at the time, which was a complete waste of printing material. And even back in the day, actually thinking about it, Draytek used to include screwdrivers. They don't anymore. They changed that to post-it notes. I don't know whether they still do. I haven't ordered a Draytek for a very long time, but the product catalogue does bring back some memories. This has got the instruction guide in it as well as the CD. Not that we're going to be using that, and I appreciate that was slightly washed out with all the studio lights. But I was having a quick flick through this before I started recording, and this does support PPPoE and PPPoA. But the thing that I was looking for was the pinout, which fortunately Draytek include in the manual. But what's interesting is this refers to pair 1 and pair 2. Now, back in the day, I never we always just had a single SDSL line, and to be fair, I never actually read the manual. But this refers to a flat module cable for channel bonding, and the Draytek can support 2-line bonded, which I was not aware of. It's handy because I've got the pin out for pair 1, but it also goes on about using these blocks for splitting out the cables to the router and so forth. But that might be something to play with, actually, because I hadn't even considered that as a possibility. I can't even remember seeing it in the software for this, to be completely honest with you, back in the day. So where that was hidden, I don't know, unless it was in plain sight and I never actually saw it. But yeah, jumping back to the Zhone, I don't know if this was there when I turned all this on initially, but under status I found the SHDSL bonded page, which has a port status, and it has port 1 or slot 1 port 1, which is showing us up, ready, everything's connected. It's showing a maximum obtainable rate down and up of around 5 megabits per second. SDSL in the UK was always limited to 2 meg. I don't actually officially know what the maximum that this can support. It was always 2 meg. I have had a quick run through on the options for this, and I can't see any profiling or anything like that. So I don't know whether it's even possible to change the speed limits on all of this. Certainly if you go into it, there's no option for anything like that, just polling intervals and sample dates for sort of statistics, and that is in the statistics page. I can't find anything in, oh, I didn't see that. It's amazing what happens when you go back to things twice after having a bit of a clear head. The operator status is down, admin status is up, so let's go into that. So, okay, so we can do that. Line type, okay. I'm assuming we'll want to change that to SDSL. I have no idea what any of these do, so we might have to play around with them. Unit configuration mode, CO or CPE. I'm guessing it's going to be CPE. Line admin up alarm. Okay, EFM port profiles. We do stuff in here. So, port bond groups. So if I, for devil's advocate, if I change that to say 2 meg and applied it, I'm assuming you want me to tick that, would that then appear as what this port is set up to on here? If I go back to system, no, status, port status. No, it's still showing the maximum obtainable rates. I don't know whether, where was it in here? I don't know whether this actually changes anything like that. I mean, this is referring to EFM, and the SDSL bond is EFM. So let's put that back to where it was. In fact, actually, that value wasn't even what we'd initially looked at. So is it under this? I have no idea. All of this is completely foreign to me. Maximum line attenuation. It's possible that we have to configure the profiles differently. Either way, I'm not too fussed about the speed. Just actually getting this working would be cool. It'd be interesting to see if this actually supports the 5 meg and if this is just going to work. This I haven't factory reset. I don't know if it's configured for anything. That will be the next thing to see if we can actually get on to the Draytek. And if we can get onto the Draytek as well, then I don't see any reason why we can't then just go and drop the Zhone into the cabinet, which is where all the telco connectors are that are coming out through the back, and just see if this works. If it does, it'd be super cool. And then I could start diving into some of the other stuff and maybe messing around to see what syncs and what doesn't sync. I have no idea if things like this are just going to work. I said boxes like this are typically for Ethernet, so I highly doubt they're going to support PPPoE or any type of authentication. They are literally just going to want an IP on the interface, potentially. I believe that's the same for the Hatteras network that's on the floor under everything else. So, right, then we unplug the Draytek in and see if it blows me up. And also, can we get into it, or do I need to factory reset it? And then we'll start messing around a bit more. Right, I thought I'd bring you along for turning on the Draytek, simply because I don't know if I trust this. I don't know how long, when this was last used, the state of the caps, anything like this. As I said, the box that this came in was quite water damaged on the outside. The device itself looks okay, and on the assumption this is going to work, I have got cable down RJ45 plugs, crimp tools to actually make a DSL cable for it. This is obviously plugged into my laptop, and obviously the MSAN is underneath. So please don't blow up. 3, 2, 1. Nothing. Oh, it does help if I turn it on in the extension lead. Oh, screw it. Go. The smoke. Ah, lights. Oh, they bring back memories. Draytek, back in the day, I used to love their kit. Really, really did. Now, I said, I don't know if this is configured. I've literally just pulled this out of the box, and it's the first time I've turned it on. Potentially, we're going to need to factory reset it, which we can do there. Right, let's jump back to the screen. Well, plugged into it, and I've also got Wireshark running purely because, as you may have already spotted, I have a 169 address. There are DHCP requests going out, however, there is nothing being received, and even without the filter in it, there's just a load of background rubbish from my laptop. There is nothing coming from the Draytek. So what I suspect is that this has been configured for something with DHCP turned off. It may even have a static IP subnet on it from a previous provider, maybe a /29, something like that. That would make sense with an SDSL service because they were business services back in the day. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It would have been really cool to see who this was initially configured for before it got to me. But I could waste a fair amount of time on it, and I don't have time because this video is already late because I have been unwell. Let's factory reset it, and I will make that cable up. Well, I'll factory reset it, make sure we can get into it, make the cable up, move the Zhone, connect it all together, and fingers crossed we actually get somewhere with it. I'll be back in a bit. Right, so this is in and mounted, and I'm going to moan a little bit, purely because I've already moaned about the routing of the power cables on the back and how they came out the sides and failed on the side of the bars. Now, I did follow the same routing for that to get this in, because I didn't have time to sort the plastic out, and even with a proper rack, unlike the one I've made myself, they capture on the side still, even with the smaller cables. I've had to be really careful getting this in. But the other really annoying thing that I hadn't taken into account is these mounting brackets are recessed, which causes several problems. Number one, I'll get a close-up of this, but the front of the chassis actually overhangs the bar. So you can't actually cleanly get in to screw these in because this protrudes over slightly. Also, because of that, you have to use really short screws to get them in between the chassis and in through the hole to screw into the cage nut. Now, while this isn't heavy, holding this with one arm, trying to get screws in, becomes quite heavy after a really short period of time. And anyone that's racked anything by themselves will know exactly what I'm talking about. The other thing is that this is now pushed forward because of these brackets being recessed. And unlike everything else in here that is all nicely flush with the bar, this now sticks out, which means this cable sticks out further than where the door closes. And unlike the DSLAM up here, where it's actually just enough where we can close the door, on the SDSL one, it sticks out. So it means I'm going to have to take all of this out, move these bars back slightly by about an inch or so to be able to accommodate the new MSAN, so I can actually close the bloody door on all of this and try and keep some of the noise out. It's a nice problem to have. I never thought in a million years I'd have one MSAN, let alone two MSANs, especially of both the technology which I grew up with. So I'm moaning, but I'm moaning in a happy way. It's a nice problem to have. Right, that I have also got plugged in, which is running up to the desk and the other cable. So I need to find pair one on that, and I'll find a couple of pairs actually. I have no idea what state these cards are in, whether they're going to work, what config we need to do. Hopefully we can just connect the Draytek and it comes into sync and off it goes. However, looking at some of the options as I was going back through some of the footage for everything, I'm questioning whether it is going to work. I hope it does. I hope it's just like the ZYXEL. But anyway, I am rambling. Let's find out what happens. Right, while that's booting, the Zhone is coming up on this 24 pair cable, which is going into the IDC block. I've got ports 1 and 2 on that. At the second, I don't have the other pair connected, but it's going through the center pairs, which is pairs 4 and 5 into the Draytek. And I guess we'll just see if that DSL light goes static green. I can't remember if these rapid flash when they're actually training, or whether it's a slow sync and then goes green, or whether this is going to sync at all. As I said, there's a load of things that are different on this to the ZYXEL that I have fundamentally no idea about. And the chances of this just working, I mean, to be fair, the ZYXEL did, but as I said, that was an awful lot simpler than this. Again, I don't know whether the Draytek works. I've got no way of testing it to prove it was a good working unit. Maybe this is why it was on eBay. I don't know. There's so many unknowns with all of this. I mean, I guess I could test one of the other EFM boxes to see whether one of these sync like this as an example, and then make a cable up for it to see if that indeed does connect. There was a pin out for this somewhere, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. This, however, is not looking particularly too promising. So I'm going to leave this trying to sync, and I'm going to jump on the web interface for the MSAN and see if we can see anything in terms of this trying to sync, any statistics on the port or anything like that. Okay, so as always on this channel, things have escalated. Looking at the stats in the DSLAM, none of the channels were showing any form of activity. No initializations, no nothing. So I've come to the conclusion that it might just be the Draytek that's causing the issue. So I hadn't planned on showing this or even getting it out of the box just yet. However, I have another advert. This is actually the Hatteras Networks model number. Ooh, HN408-CP. Now, this was used for EFM circuits back in the day. It's based on SDSL technology, and so EFM is just a form of SDSL bonding. Now, the nice thing I had with this one is it came with the cable. It actually came with the pretty much non-existent OpenReach RJ45 faceplates that would actually convert a standard socket into a proper RJ45 cable, specifically for these. And with the Hatteras, this actually came with all of this. So it was actually a really good find on eBay and actually got a really good deal. Yeah, now it is missing a cable in that there should be two of these because this is a 8-pair EFM box. It has one of the cables with it, the other one's missing, but it did come with 4 faceplates, one cable to do 4-pair bonding, and I can make other cables up. It was just nice to have it as a set. Now, what I have now reverted to is actually pulling in the sockets, ignore the abuse that they're getting. That's now connected through to here. That's now jumping in on pair 5, which is going over to here. Now, it doesn't matter that it's pair 5, they're mirrored the same. It's just that it's pairs 1 to 4, 5 to 8. This cable will work in either or, but at the minute, it's not working in any of them. We're not even getting a sync on these either. Now, it's possible that it's this that's not configured. However, typically these would call home to get their config, so it makes no sense that the interfaces wouldn't be enabled. Now, I've also had my multimeter out as well, because going back through the profiles on the Zhone, there were different profiles that you could enable from these cards if you cast your memory back. One of which was NT and NTP. Now, NTP stood for network timing. It also, looking at the manual, introduced what was referred to as a wetting current, where basically it would send a small amount of voltage down the line. And then NTP didn't send any voltage down the line. However, it was used specifically for their Skyhone and other CPE devices of their own. The standard SDSL profile should work. However, I have enabled the NT profile on line card 2, which does deliver a voltage, and I've tested that voltage coming out of the sockets on these. So I know that there is something coming from the MSAN. Whether it is correct or not, I don't know. But it does seem that our issue lies with the MSAN and potentially, in particular, configuration on that. So I need to dive into that a bit more to see what is going on. Right, so going back to the Zhone, now I've got this wired into what I thought was port 1, or at least it's pair 1 on the cable, and it's pair 1 for the ZYXEL. However, I hadn't realized when I clicked on this page, when it loads up, it shows this. I've actually just scrolled down and I've actually seen initializations on port 23 and port 24 on line card 1. Now, I am finally able to see card 2. I hadn't been able to see this previously. And even so, down here as well, there are initializations on port 24. So the wiring for the pinout on the cards is actually different to the ZYXEL and other things I've actually got running here, which I wasn't expecting. It's one of the reasons I wanted to check this. However, it's just the fact that when I loaded it, this loaded, and I had just assumed that port 1 was there and hadn't seen any initializations really. I don't know why these are showing 2. Nothing's been on them, but that's a positive thing, in at least something is attempting to connect. We just need to find out why they're not synchronizing, and it is going to boil down to the profile. I don't really want to stop until I've actually got something synced at the very least. Now this is on port or slot 2, so if I refresh this, it'll be interesting to see if that counter's gone up, which it has, and the ADFA is currently connected into that. So pair 1 is actually pair 24 on the Zoho, so that's something to bear in mind. This, I don't know if it, I mean, there's potentially some logs in here as to say why it's not working. I would expect it to sync, even if there was an issue, say, with VPI and VCI. Well, I can't seem to find that outside of the link aggregation. I would still expect it to sync, I think. At least it did with the ADSL initially. When I first got the DSLAM, the VPI and VCI details were completely out. It still synced, but then it did drop itself after sort of 20 seconds. Maybe that is the issue with all of this. I need to see if I can find out where I change those values, if I change those values on here. I'm going to keep digging. Unfortunately, despite hours of trying, I cannot get this Draytek to sync, and all of that boils down to simply my misunderstanding of SDSL and the technology and everything involved in it. As I said from outset, and I'm not afraid to admit it, I know nothing when it comes to actually setting up the MSAN and the SDSL side of stuff. The ADSL side of stuff was an absolute cakewalk in comparison. This, however, has not been so. And unfortunately, as I said, it boils down to simply my misunderstanding. Now, what is annoying is on the front of this, this does actually say G.SHDSL. It says it in the GUI, it says it in the documentation, but after digging and just messing around, I've come to the conclusion this is actually SDSL, which is the older standard. G.SHDSL or EFM SHDSL is the newer SDSL standard, effectively. This was made before the MSAN was built. SHDSL is specifically designed really for channel bonding and for EFM use, and EFM is just basically bonding the SDSL channels together. And I kind of got focused on seeing everything that I wanted to see in VPI values and VCI values and various other bits that made sense for this, like PPPoA in the MSAN, and thinking, oh yeah, it's not. It's for completely different stuff in the MSAN, and this is for the older standard. So unfortunately, this is not going to work. Now, I know this video is running on for quite some time, as it already is, because I need to go through and edit the last section of this. I've been doing it in bits. I need to see where we are in terms of time as to whether I've actually got enough time to try and get something else to work. I highly doubt it, but what I would love to do is at least finish this video with something in sync at the very least, and even if we continue it on in a later video, it gives me some time to actually understand what I need to do to get that to work, because that revolves around Ethernet and bridging ports and IPs on the actual EFM boxes, and then yeah, there's a lot more to it. So I'm going to go and see how long this is, and then I will come back to you with where I've got to. Now, looking back at what I've edited and the videos I have still got to put into this and sort out, this video is approaching over an hour long, so I'm not going to make anyone else watch me try and bumble my way through this any longer than absolutely necessary. And it's probably a good thing, because I have plugged in the Hathras networks and not even this synced. The difference with this, however, was I did actually see initializations coming through on the MSAN, so it was at least attempting to connect. However, it just wouldn't. I did plug a cable into the craft port, and I can log into that with the default details, and there doesn't appear to be any configuration on it other than sort of generic details for the EFM ports on it, which I don't know if it's correct, because I've got no reference to know what is and what isn't correct with all of this, but it's not syncing, but it is attempting to. So at least the MSAN is doing something. Now, I did kind of think that all was lost and I wasn't going to get this to work. That was until I plugged in the RAD box purely out of desperation to see what it did. And port 24 has actually come up. It's in sync at the minute. Obviously, there is nothing going on with it because nothing is configured, and I don't even know what I need to do on the MSAN to even look at like bridging the network ports to this to see if I can get DHCP running. I don't know. The RAD box in itself is a complete unknown. I have scanned through the documentation, and it's not easy. There's a load of references in that to adver commands, as well as, annoyingly, the Hatter. So it seems that everything that I'm dealing with as of late has some sort of reference or some sort of root or foundation back to adver, which doesn't surprise me because they are a fairly decent vendor in terms of network infrastructure for this particular purpose. But it does mean I've got my work cut out for me to try and get that to work, as well as the MSAN. Bearing in mind, I have no base configuration for any of this whatsoever, so I don't even know if one of them's correct and the other one's not. This is a complete shot in the dark, but it is going to have to be for another video. I haven't recorded the outro yet. I need to tidy everything up, and I think that is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to tidy up, and I will see you guys back at the chair. Well, that didn't exactly go as I had planned, but it does go to show the massive differences between CPEs and endpoints in this type of technology space back in the day. I mean, the Draytek's just not working, I'm pretty sure, just because of the standard of SDSL, but it goes to show we've got one that didn't work at all, one that tried, and one that did. And the one that did is the one that I thought was least likely to work out of all of them. It just shows how much more learning I need to do on this entire platform and the technology type in order to get this to work. And we will revisit this because I want EFM working on this at the end of the day. I want to be passing traffic across it. I think it'll be really cool. The other thing that I have noticed is in the Draytek, you've got the ability to set CPE and CO on the WAN interface. So maybe it's possible that we get another one of them, set one to CO, one to CPE, and see if we can set up an SDSL link between them as well. I seem to vaguely recall Draytek offering that as a feature where you could use like a dry copper pair between buildings to create a link. So we'll have a look at that at some point in the future. But all of this exists purely because of my main channel sponsor, Zen. If you are in the market for residential broadband, go and check out Zen. The link is in the video description below. They are an amazing bunch of people, and I cannot thank them enough for everything they do for me, not only here, but outside of this channel as well. And also they are preparing yet another load of equipment to come to me, which means I need to get the rest of the equipment I've still got here covered, because they've got some massive bits of kit turning up as well. One of which I do now believe is the Juniper 960 or EMX 960. That thing's huge. It's about, it'll take up a quarter of a rack alone. So I need to start getting through some of the stuff. Speaking of getting through some of the stuff, this channel is starting to become expensive, and I no way want anything from you guys. The best thing that you can do to support me is just subscribe to the channel. But I have had a number of people reach out to me outside of YouTube saying, how can they support me? Now, to that end, I have set up an online store where you can buy t-shirts and hoodies at minimal cost. There's also minimal return to me on that. It's just me being able to give you something back for anything that you do want to give me. So I will drop that link in the video description below. A number of you have also asked for Patreon. My concern with Patreon is, again, you guys giving me money and me not being able to give anything in return at this moment in time. All of this is done in my free time, and I love doing it, but I can't do a load of the behind the scenes stuff. I could probably take pictures and little bits of video. So we will start off small with Patreon. I will do a couple of tiers, one where it'll be a couple of pounds a month, which is me, well, you guys saying, here's some money, me saying thank you. And then we'll do one where maybe I can put your name on the end credits on the channel, and we'll move up from there as I start to be able to get the resources to do this a bit more, because I enjoy doing it. I want to do it more. And as the channel grows, hopefully I will be able to do that financially as well. But at the minute, I do all of this purely for fun, and literally I don't want anything from you guys. But if you do want to support me, there are options below in order to do that. And on that note, I have taken up far too much of your valuable time. Guys, if you are still here watching, you are absolutely incredible and amazing. I cannot thank you enough. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.